we were talking with Srila Prabhupada, and Nandan was remembering that he'd worked in Prabhupada was talking about Ugra Karma and how people work so hard and they get no result for it, and etc., and how difficult it is for them. So Nandan Swami began to speak about how he used to work in a canning factory in California before he was a devotee for some period of time. And he began to describe in detail, some detail at least, what it was like to work in this hellish factory. So I'd been around a couple of years now, I was a bit more confident, so I felt, even though a little shy and nervous, I still thought, well, I have a little something to say here, and I began to talk to Prabhupada about how I worked in a steel factory for a few weeks, or a month or so, when I was about 20, a year or so before I met Srila Prabhupada. And I began to describe it in some detail. There was this huge press, and there were two people working on this press, and our only job was to lift up the metal guard of the press and take one huge sheet of steel and put it into the press and pull down the guard and press the button, and this big press would come down and make this piece of steel into a shape of a bath. And then we'd walk around the other side of the press, huge hydraulic press, and lift up the guard and take out the bath and throw it onto a conveyor belt and pull down the guard and walk around the other side and lift up the guard and put in the steel and pull down the guard and press the button, and the press would come down and go around the other. So I was speaking, and Prabhupada was listening and watching and smiling, not smiling, but listening carefully. And I said that then I was doing quite well, Prabhupada. They invited me to work night shift. You got extra money on night shift. So that's what I thought, that I was such a good worker. Actually, it was nobody wanted to do it. But there was a little extra pay, so I thought I'd try. And I found after 1 or 2 weeks that I nearly had a nervous breakdown. I was actually working all night. I couldn't sleep during the day. And because I was such a sense gratifier, I would always go out in the night with my friends, so then I'd go from there to work. So after a couple of weeks of this, I almost had a nervous breakdown from the strain. And Prabhupada listened, and then he was thinking, and he said, actually, that's because in your last life you were all Brahmins. And everyone was sort of looking. There were about 10 people in the room. And he said, actually, otherwise, how could you so quickly come to the platform of Krishna consciousness? And then he stopped and he thought for a little longer. He was leaning on his cushions. He was very relaxed mood, leaning back on his cushions with this table. I think it was this same table in front of him at the time. And he was relaxed. He was leaning back and thinking. And then he said, actually, my Guru Maharaj has ordered you all to take birth to help me spread this mission. So everyone's ears are popping up. And then he looked around across everyone in the room, and he finished. I was sitting here with Nandan, and he looked across everyone, and he finished on me because I was the last one to speak to him. And he said, and now we are all together again. And as he said that, he just beamed. And he had his hand behind his head as he does, Prabhupada. And now we are all together again. And he beamed, and everyone just went, Jai Prabhupada, and some devotees began to cry.
Well, see, Shyam Sundar was very eager to have this very place transformed into a proper temple. And so the building became like a construction site. And he mentioned to George it was very difficult for us to live there because there was so much dust, and there was so much noise because he had to put in reinforced metal beams and all kinds of work had to be done there. And he said it was very difficult for the devotees to live in that building while that construction work was going on. And could he help us in any way? And he said, well, I'll speak to John Lennon because he's just acquired a big property and he might be able to put you up. Because at that time, George was living in Esher, in Surrey. And he didn't have a big house, but he knew that John's house was much bigger. He hadn't moved into Friar Park in Henley. Otherwise, I'm sure he would have invited us to stay with him. But it was just due to the circumstances. So John agreed. He thought it was a really good idea. In fact, he was incredibly favorable. He offered us 5 acres of land. So this particular estate had 76 acres, and he wasn't into farming or agriculture or anything like that. And he said that we could have 5 acres of land. When Prabhupada was told us, Srila Prabhupada said that we should utilize this land for growing all our fresh vegetables and fruits. And he said that anything that was left over that we couldn't use for ourselves, for our own consumption, we should take into the local market in London. And he said we should take it in by bullock cart. And when Prabhupada said this, I said, but Prabhupada, there's so many lorries going in, because at that time, of course, Covent Garden was very close to where Bury Place was in Bloomsbury. Covent Garden was just down, it's still, of course, there, near where the Opera House is in Bow Street, Magistrates Court. And so I said, but the lorries will get there before the bullock cart. And probably, because we were 25 miles, at least 25, if not more, miles outside of, London. And Prabhupada said, no. He said, the bullock cart should leave the night before. And they will walk all night, and they will reach the garden before the market garden before the lorries arrive. So in 1969, this was Prabhupada's vision. He wanted us to train up animals, hitch them to a cart, and take fresh market produce into central London. He also said that we should hold a big Rath Yatra festival, starting from John Lennon's estate, and go in procession all the way into central London, stopping at different little towns and villages on the way.
In St. James's Park, Prabhupada would constantly be pointing out things, different things. I mean, there was one time we were in a park, and there was that now there was that story which I remember, but there was some bird droppings, and Prabhupada was asking, he was saying, what is this? And everyone was kind of looking at the bird droppings and thinking, well, they were kind of thinking, well, maybe Prabhupada means some tea leaf formations, like we could esoterically look at it. And Prabhupada said, what does this tell you? And everyone was kind of bewildered. And then Prabhupada said, this tells you that the same bird is sleeping on the same branch every night. So Prabhupada said, even the bird becomes attached to his apartment. So he said, Prabhupada said, so be careful.